As part of an industry outreach activity for our corporate governance and business ethics course, we were honored to speak with Dr. Sudhir Bisht. Dr. Bisht is a senior leader with over 34 years of experience. He has held senior leadership in 500 companies like ExxonMobil, private sector giants like Reliance Industries, and public sector leaders like Indian Oil Corporation. From managing petroleum retail in India to serving as a COO in the telecom sector of Nigeria, Dr. Bisht is essentially a leader without frontiers. He has joined us to share his lived experience on why ethics matters and where Indian boards could improve, and even discussed the role of the Indian knowledge system in corporate governance. Here is a conversation with Dr. Sudhir Bisht. Thank you
Good
so much for
morning.
taking time to join with us today. You've had a remarkable career across academia and industry. We hope to learn from your insights and your lived experience, especially in the domain of corporate governance and ethics. My name is Girish, and with me is my colleague Bindu. We both did our undergraduate from the University of Delhi, and we both are pursuing a master's in the Department of Commerce, Delhi University.
Very good.
If that is okay with you, sir, we would like to ask questions alternatively.
It would be a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Bindu, you can go ahead.
Sir, to give our audience a sense of your journey, we would love to hear it from you directly. So,
Okay.
sir, can you walk us through your role as a director across various companies and from your experience on the board, where do you feel Indian boards most often oversteps or perhaps underperform?
Okay. So before I answer this, I'm very happy to be with the students of the postgraduate stream of commerce. I graduated from Hindu College in Delhi in 1984.
Wow,
So
sir.
it's a matter of great pleasure to be with you. See, when we talk of corporate governance and when we talk of board of directors, we have to start thinking. First of all, we need to define the industries. Okay, who are the owners of the corporate? So, if we take India, there are three distinct categories, three or four different categories of companies. So, let us say when India attained independence, the people, the industrialists did not have enough money or capital to invest in big companies. So, you saw a lot of public sectors coming up. Indian Oil Corporation came. Of course, we had Bharat, we had Shell, and we had Caltech. So they were all nationalized. So one is a public sector company which are directly under the ministry of the respective ministries. So some of the companies which are listed among PSUs, some of the companies which are not listed. So that is one category. Second category is multinational companies who have been operating here, since independence or afterwards. So they have a different ethos actually. And then you see the big Indian corporate companies who also, who are today world-class companies like Reliance, for example, many Tata companies, Birla companies, Adani's, and tire companies like MRF and what have you. So these are companies, but they are listed in India. So this is the third category. And fourth category is those Indian companies who are not only listed in India but are listed in overseas also, for example, at NASDAQ, okay, or at some other stock exchanges. So they have completely different ethos when it comes to governance. While I would say that public sector companies, they tend to overstep in the area of conforming to the standards laid by the government. So, they fail to provide dynamism in direction to the companies. Okay, so that is where they overstep in being extra loyal and extra diligent to the ownership, which is the government. On the other hand, we will see that multinational companies, Indian companies who are getting a sizable revenue from, let us say, USA. Okay, so they have to follow what is called the SOX compliances, and they have to follow all the SEC, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission laws. So they tend to sometimes also hold themselves back. Okay, and then they overstep. So compliance becomes major part for public sector companies and Indian companies which have markets in multinational companies.
Yes.
In traditional Indian companies which don't have which are not listed overseas, I think they overstretch themselves by believing in these stockholders theory of governance. So they would like to do more and more for stock. They constantly have an eye on the market share and things like that. So various, and then there are, of course, there are many companies which are not listed, which are public sector companies. Of course, they truly believe in maximizing the wealth of the shareholder, which is the owners themselves, and typically you will find them, doing everything which suits their the corporate vision is dovetailed with their personal visions. So this in short would be the explanation.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll proceed to our next question. Many corporate governance frameworks, like the agency theory and stakeholder theory, are well established in academia. Sir, how applicable are these theories in the real boardroom decision making?
So, let us understand. See, there are many theories. There is shareholder theory, stockholder theory, agency theory, resource dependency theory. So to say that the board members are even aware of these theories would be a big mistake. Not everybody has studied corporate governance like you are studying or the students of MBA are studying. So, for example, I have worked with the largest public sector in India, which is Indian Oil Corporation. It is the most capitalized PSU. Then I have worked with ExxonMobil, which used to be the Fortune 1 company. Okay. Then I have worked with the Reliance Industries, which is the largest capitalized, biggest company in India in terms of market cap. And then, I work for smaller companies, private sector companies. So nobody is per se bothered about, you know, however, I have found that stakeholder theory is the theory least, which is least adhered to, unless there is a pressure from the government side. For example, when government reduced the corporate income tax from 30% to around 22-23%, at that time they brought in CSR Act, which made it mandatory to invest 2%. So if this was not there, so people would not actually look after social community or society at large. So, by and large, even till date, most companies are looking at maximizing the shareholders' wealth. Agency theory is also into play because suppose let's look at a company like which there is no real owner. Let's say Larsen and Toubro, or let's take Hindustan Unilever, where okay, Unilever of the UK would be the so in these companies agency theory comes into play, and it is the job of the CEOs and his team to ensure that they are in sync with the vision of the board. However, I agree in the agency theory. Agency theory, the managerial setup is more worried about their own gains. This happens, but slowly things are becoming professionals. If you see the concept of ESOP, which is to give stock options to the managers, so this is inculcating a sense of ownership even in the management. So I would say things are improving, but we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go. Yeah.
So, sir, we find it quite interesting that you bring both the perspective of a researcher as well as a board director to the same table. So, sir, does your academics background strengthen your decision making as a board member, or does it sometimes create tensions between what textbooks say and what the boardroom demands of you? So,
Absolutely. It's a very brilliant question. So let me say that, I did my PhD quite late. In 2014, I started. And actually, I had enrolled myself in PhD in 1987 in Jodhpur University. So where I did my MBA with, flying colors. But at that point in time, there were no scholarships, So I had a lot of academic bent of mind. So I became CEO of a company at the age of 45 in Lagos in Nigeria. So, I had known some aspects of governance, but when I started to teach, it definitely broadened my vision. And because, I was able to correlate what is actually practiced. So, which we call, a collection of how things are practiced to what is the prescriptive theory in books. So prescriptive ethics is given in books, and other ethics which is normally practiced. So there is a lot of gap. So what I try to do is I used to get overawed. Initially I used to get overawed, and I used to actually sometimes, as my other board members would say, try to play in the extreme. So it's very difficult when there is internal conflict in you, that you think this is what should be done, and this is what is being done. But eventually, as a board member, when you sit into the board, you are a board member. You're not an academician then, although the spirit of academician remains. So one has to find a balance, and I would say that it is always possible, if you are sincere in your efforts, that you can, and if your intents are good, and if you are ethically strong, then God also supports you in bringing around other members of the board to your point of view. So it is, you have to try hard actually. That's my answer, honest answer.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for that answer. Sir, have you been in a situation where a decision was legally correct but it felt wrong ethically? How should boards deal with such gray areas?
It's a very tough, it's a very difficult situation. But see, let me give you an example of, let's say I am the district magistrate of, let's say, Bulandshahr, a district in western UP. Okay, and I have with me a budget of 10 lakhs, which I can spend on the treatment of senior citizens. So this is the budget I have. So I have 10 lakh rupees, and I can spend it on this treatment of senior citizens. And the budget is about to expire, because 31st March is going to come very soon. And I get a case wherein a small child deserves money for treatment, but he does not qualify to be a senior citizen. I have the money. My intents are good. So what do I do? So legally, I cannot allocate money to the child, because it is legally incorrect. Ethically, within me, there is a great conflict, that after all the money has been reposed in my hands by the government, so that I am able to do something good to the society. So what do you do then? I face similar kind. I'm giving an analogy because I don't want to name the company. Then, so the best thing is, see, this staff can suggest, sir, let's pull in our money to help the child. You should never do it actually. The best thing is, immediately call up the people who are senior to you and who are authorized to do so. Like in my case, in one of my cases, when I was overseas, and I was the managing director, and there was something in which we needed to remove a person, but we needed to understand that the person committed such and such thing in extraordinary circumstances, but legality demands he should be immediately sacked. So I immediately convened a board meeting, online board meeting, and I took all my members on my side, and then we put it to vote. So when we put it to vote, the majority said the person should be dismissed. So I had to dismiss the person. It was, to my mind, it was ethically, I should have been lenient, but legally he was dismissed. But then I have this solace in my mind that I tried my best. I rallied around other board members. I spoke to them, and then we took a decision. So, this is my suggestion whenever you are faced in such conflicts. These are practical things. I'm not saying this is correct or not correct, but this is what I did. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for your answer. Sir, there is a growing conversation about rooting governance in Indian knowledge system. So, going beyond Western framework and looking at our philosophical heritage, my question go ahead with, sir, with the renewed emphasis on the Indian knowledge system in corporate governance, such as Gandhian trusteeship model, what practical relevance do you see for such ideas in today's business world? Can they actually influence how a board behave?
Absolutely. See, it is like this. If you see the DIKW model of wisdom, at the bottom sits the data, and then over that sits information, and over that knowledge, and then wisdom. So, see, wisdom in board is an accumulated experience of all the board members. And for a particular board member, his wisdom, it comes from his culture, his learning, his understanding. If we go deep, if see, we cannot go to uh, the age when man was an ape. So we need to go back to the age of, the Indus Valley civilization, and then the Vedic period, and then we come to the other era, right from right from the civilization of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, we will find from our textbooks that there are basic tenets of governance which are there. For example, if you what should be the role of a king is a ruler is very well defined in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, what should be when we are faced in a conflict like situation? So, which of the values we have to prefer? So, you are faced with a situation where you have to do good for the larger good of the society versus your own the personal good of your clan. So these all conflicts are dealt with in our ancient textbooks. Okay, so this can be a great source of learning for us, and this can aid us in decision making. Of course, Kautilya's Arthashastra. If you if you read it if you read it critically, there are many areas which can. So, for example, how much should be, what should be the taxation, so to say. So, what should be the taxation, and you see how should we use our environment. So, our text says that we should exploit the environment just like a honeybee. It suckles nectar from a flower so as to it can make the honey, and yet it does not lead to the withering away of flower. The flower remains. So this is how we should use our environment. So all these theories, see, for example, theory of utilitarianism, which says something which is for the greatest good of greatest number of people should be pursued. All these aspects of learning are encapsulated in all the six darshans of Vedant, the Shad Darshan, which is Nyaya Vaishashika and Sankhya Yoga, Purv Mimamsa, Uttar Mimamsa. Every reading of you can't read the full text, but if you read the abbreviation, if you read the abridged version, it can tell you how deep the Indian knowledge system goes, and it is relevant in today's world, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the insightful conversation and for the mention of Kautilya's Arthashastra. We'll take a look at it, sir, surely. So, my next question would be, in your experience, is ethics, especially business ethics, something that can be taught to students, or is it something that can be learned only through experience and pressure?
See, anything which is taught from kindergarten to PhD, everything is useful. Let me tell you. See, sometimes I am faced with a situation wherein what I learned in class 8th comes useful to me. You will not believe it. Knowledge never ever goes waste. As far as ethics is concerned, let's understand that what is ethics. Ethics, strictly speaking, is a part of, it is a stream of philosophy. So, just like we have epistemology, we have metaphysics. So metaphysics will deal with what is beyond the matter, and epistemology will deal with how we know what we know, the process of finding the truth. Okay, gathering knowledge, how to do experimentation. Okay, so similarly, ethics is a branch of philosophy, and axiology, you can call it axiology. Axiology can have two branches: ethics and aesthetics. So, for example, I'm very happy that you are talking about agency theory and you are talking about stakeholders theory. So if a person in his graduate, undergraduate, or postgraduate class is explained what are the various theories, just like we have theories of ethics, we have models of governance also. We have a German model, we have a French model, and we have an Indian model and an American model. So when we know which model has what pros and what cons, so this will eventually help in decision making. Let me also tell you, nothing that is contained in books comes from vacuum. It comes from the collective experiences and wisdom of many people who write that book and who research that book. So I'll be very, I'll strongly recommend, teaching of ethics, especially business ethics. Also, like in medical colleges, they teach medical ethics. What is medical ethics, right? So that's my point of view.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your insights. So, As we approach to end of our conversation today, we would love to leave our fellow student with something they can actually act on.
Okay.
Sir, what is the one habit, just one, that student can start cultivating today, or to protect ourselves from the ethical blind spots when we step into leadership roles in the future?
See, there are two things I would say. One thing I will say about ethics, and about ethics, I would say that one must clearly demarcate for himself the values which he or she will hold very dear to himself, and one must write it down, and one must be firm in adhering to that philosophy. So it is, and you must deeply introspect and then arrive, and in life, come what may, you must adhere to those values. Okay. So don't be very rigid, but make values and follow that. Second thing, anybody who's graduating or post graduating, not going into research, going into job market or business, you must keep yourself creatively engaged. So uh, my philosophy is the line which I read somewhere: when was the last time you learned something for the first time? So when was the last time you learned something for the first time? So if you go back 3 years, if you have not learned anything significantly different in the last 3 years, then you need to, for example, if Bindu and Girish have one of you have learned to play, or at least attempted to play mouth organ or harmonium, or to play kho, whatever, or to do long jump, or if in the last 3 years you took up gym for the first time, or walking, running for the first time, so try to do something, and there should not be a gap of more than 3 years when you have not learned anything in the last 3 years. So that keeps you creatively active, engaged, and you're good to go in life. Yeah. So that's my message to all your scholars and classmates.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. On behalf of both of us here today, we want to sincerely thank you for taking your time and your sharing your wisdom with us. Uh,
Okay.
There to hear governance not just discussed as a compliance exercise, but as a way of thinking and
Right.
art of living as well. So we are truly grateful and thank you so much, sir.
So that was our meeting with Dr. Sudhir Bisht, who provided us with a masterclass in governance. One of the most powerful takeaways from this conversation is the bee and flower analogy, the idea that a business should thrive while keeping its environment intact. It is a vital reminder for all of us who will be future professionals that governance was not just a tick box exercise for compliance, it is a way of thinking and a fundamental part of leadership. On behalf of all of us, we sincerely thank Dr. Bisht for his time and his invaluable wisdom. And we thank you all for watching. We hope this interview inspired your career journey as much as it did ours.